On today's show, we need to talk about our corrupt politicians and why they're hell-bent on gas. And to help me, I've got a very special guest, Simon Holmes, to call. Oh, and there's a bit more. G'day, my name's Chris and I cover from an Australian perspective everything around renewable technologies like electric vehicles, battery storage, wind, solar and more. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing, it's free. And if you want to take your support to the next level, consider joining me over here on Patreon where you get early access to news, polls, behind the scenes and stuff that you just don't get here. And I'd like to say a big thank you to my producers, Alan Bird, Adam Tyson, Ashley Hill, MN ICT Specialist and Tess on the Gong. As this is a Monday mega news show, please use the chapter markers down below to jump to the section that interests you most. Our New Zealand friends, hi guys, thanks for watching, are about to get a big subsidy to help consumers get into EVs. Announced earlier this week, the rebate can provide up to $8,000 Australian dollars for new EVs and for second-hand ones, $3,100. Wow, that would mean a Tesla Model 3 would cost about $60,000 or a used Nissan Leaf $12,000. Also, shame about that $5,000 EV tax. More information, follow the link. For plug-in hybrids, they also benefit from this initiative with new cars eligible up to $5,000 or $2,000 off a used model. But if this wasn't awesome enough, there's also a flip side to this subsidy, a tax on polluting motorists. Yeah, you heard right, a tax on vehicles that pollute. Amazing! To balance this EV subsidy and therefore help people get into an EV that is cheaper, this new tax package will mean that for ICE car purchases made on or after January 1, 2022, they'll be slugged with an equally large tax bill. How much? 5,100 New Zealand dollars or 4,700 Australian dollars. Oh, and it gets better. If you drive one of these things, you would pay an additional fee of New Zealand $2,900. To summarise the economics, I'll let Michael Wood, New Zealand's Transport Minister, explain it. A discount on electric, hybrid and low-emission vehicles, funded from a fee on high-emitting ones, is the best policy to increase low-emission vehicle uptake in New Zealand. It's a common policy overseas, a recommendation of both the Climate Commission and Productivity Commission, and it's supported by the likes of the Motor Industry Association. It's time to get moving with it. Wow, mind blown. Pity our Australian politicians aren't so learned. Time for a round of bites. Faraday Future announced last week that production would start by July 2022 at an assembly plant in Central California. The 1.1 million square foot building can produce 10,000 vehicles per year when it's up and running, which means that Faraday's much anticipated luxury EV, the FF91 SUV, is set to compete with vehicles like Tesla's Model X. With a 0 to 100 kilometer time in just a bit over 2.5 seconds, high-end finish and more, this is great news, particularly as they recently went through near bankruptcy, only to be saved by a $3.4 billion merger with Property Solution Acquisition Corp. More details are down beneath. Mazda Corporation announced last week that it will accelerate its global electrification plans, stating that by 2030, Mazda will have a massive 1/4 of its product line in pure electric form. On a more positive note, the remaining 3/4 of its cars will be electrified in some form. I discussed this last week with my patrons following Toyota's reassurance to market that it's going to stick with internal combustion engine cars as long as it can. 2040. 2040! And it seems that currently in 2021, Mazda is echoing the same tune as, well, yeah. And so if their goals don't change, I'm calling it out now. Toyota, Mazda, and other Japanese car makers will become the next Kodaks of the 21st century. Either innovate, shift to electric, and at least try to catch up to competitors. And maybe, just maybe, they might have their brand out on our roads in the 2030s. Volvo Cars is teaming up with Swedish steelmaker Saab to jointly explore the development of fossil-free steel for use in automotive industry. In a side-on to its main business, Hybrid aims to replace coking coal, historically needed for iron ore-based steelmaking, with fossil-free electricity and hydrogen. The result is expected to be the world's first fossil-free steelmaking technology with virtually no carbon footprint. Now, this is something I didn't know, until now that is, so please share it around as well. Global steel industry accounts for about 7% of carbon emissions. 7%. Transport, more than 20%. Stationary energy, 50%. Fugitive emissions, 8%. Angus, I'll be talking about you very soon. There's also some others in there too. Steel's emissions are not insignificant and represent a big part of the emissions pie. By 2026, Saab aims to supply the market with fossil-free steel at commercial scale, with Volvo being the first to integrate them into their cars. I applaud Volvo Saab for the efforts, and this is great news indeed. Time for a quick round of Charging Australia. What do you typically pay for public EV charging? 40 cents per kilowatt hour, 60 cents per kilowatt hour, sometimes free? Love that. So how about 10 cents per kilowatt hour? That's what Bell Resources is promising by using its car wash outlets, rooftop solar, car wash revenue, and off-peak battery stored energy. This rate is great, and a clever one too. Imagine this. Honey, I'm out washing the car and filling it up. Honestly, that 10 cents is way less than I currently pay, and undercuts most charging companies like Tesla, who can charge up to 52 cents per kilowatt hour. Or, I guess, for the 14% of owners who, like EV owners, who live in apartments, units, or townhouses in Australia, and they don't have ready access to a home charger, this will be a real lifesaver. Bell Resources plans to roll out these chargers to 63 of the car wash sites across Victoria, ACT, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, and Western Australia. And they'll install 350 kilowatt DC ultra rapid charging stations made by Swedish company ABB. The Queensland government has announced that it would double the length of Queensland's electric superhighway with a $2.75 million commitment to deliver 18 new charging sites across the state. In what is already good coverage along the coastline, this 1,800 kilometre expansion will allow motorists to explore outback Queensland entirely emissions-free, reducing range anxiety, and help out both locals and tourists get to where they're going, with improved confidence. If you want to see if one of these 49 are going to be near you, check out the links below. Remember not too long ago, I talked about Australian company AirSpeeder? Now they've got and released their first historic demonstration flight, conducted at an undisclosed location in South Australia, under observation of Australia's Civil Aviation Safety Authority. AirSpeeder demonstrated its remote pilot system in action, and I'm impressed. Cool, right? Remote piloting, battery swaps, exciting stuff. The quadcopter has 8 motors and a combined power output of 320 kilowatts. Weighing just 130 kilograms, it can lift a weight of more than 80 kilos, which in future will mean that piloted versions can be produced. Acceleration from 0 to 100 km per hour just takes 2.8 seconds, and the speeder can climb to 500 meters and perform 5G moves. No, not that sort of 5G, this sort of 5G. The team at AirSpeeder will soon be releasing more details about its Exit International Grand Prix series, so I'll keep an eye on this, as this tech can definitely be ramped up to personal mobility devices like what we're seeing announced by Uber and its Elevate series, and Airhung, I think that's how you say it, yeah, Airhung from China, who are actually now doing like taxi service with these remote, actually autonomous drones. Pretty impressive stuff, and I'm really excited more so that this is an Australian company. BMW is exploring how the X5 can be used as a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Meet the BMW iHydrogen Next. A pure electric vehicle that uses hydrogen as fuel by converting it into electricity in a fuel cell. The recently launched testing program, which will pave the way for BMW Group to present a small series model in late 2022. As you all know, my thoughts on hydrogen is that it's a potentially clean and green fuel if derived from renewable energy, and there will be applications for it. But in cars, no. It's unnecessary, especially as battery density and range improve year on year. And I get that research and development is required so that perhaps this technology can be scaled up for shipping and aviation industries. So with that said, let's explore Beamer's iNext. The BMW iHydrogen Next uses fuel cells from the Product Development Corporation with Toyota Motor Corporation. No surprises there, hey patrons. Anyhow, the individual cells come from Toyota, while the fuel cell stack and complete drive system are original BMW parts. The iNext delivers power output of 275 kilowatts or 374 horsepower. Pretty good, that's like V6 territory. And the car stores energy in a performance buffer and uses it for dynamic acceleration, maneuvers, and short bursts of speed, such as overtaking. Range is not yet reported, but from what I've learned about hydrogen fuel cell, is that the two 6-kilogram tanks should be capable of about 500 to 600 kilometers before needing to be refueled at one of these $1 million pumps. Yes, that's the other issue I have with hydrogen. They tie motorists to an outdated retail supply chain and involves way too many hands for my liking. Compared to EVs, there's just no comparison. So yes, my keyboard warriors, do your best. Put down in the comments why you would like the inconvenience of filling up at a petrol station every week compared to, say, waking up to a full tank of electricity in your own driveway. The New South Wales government is set to announce in this week's budget a $500 million commitment to increase EV uptake. Just like Victoria's $3,000 subsidy, the New South Wales version goes one further by supporting the purchase of a new EV up to $68,000 for 25,000 lucky buyers. But on top of that, they'll also get stamp duty taken off the price, meaning that if you buy a Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, you'll get an additional $2,435 off the price. That would make the drop-away price $64,673. Awesome! That would make New South Wales the most affordable state in Australia to be able to buy an EV. But this stamp duty waiver is only for EVs at less than $78,000. So long-range variants and no doubt Model Y when it comes to Australia won't get this additional subsidy. Additionally, EV owners will be able to use carpool lanes, and the government will spend $131 million to establish a network of ultra-fast vehicle chargers across the state. That will include a further $20 million in grants for key tourist sites to offer destination facilities, and an additional $20 million for charging infrastructure at public transport hubs. But seeing how Victoria did so well with this EV tax, New South Wales is also going to introduce a 2.5 cent per kilometre distance charge by 2027, or once EVs at 30% of all new car sales, whichever comes first. Despite this tax, New South Wales' plan is ticking a lot of boxes. It's going to decrease the cost of buying a new one, improves charging infrastructure, and incentivises people into EVs. They predict that by 2030, more than 50% of road users will be electric vehicles, but my hope, it will be actually much higher than that. Do you smell something stinky? Is that gas? There's some dirty politics going on, folks, so that can only mean one thing. Promises is a segment I do from time to time about what our politicians are and aren't doing in the space of renewable technologies and getting us to a cleaner and greener way of living and operating. And today, I've got the privilege of interviewing Simon Holmes, Director of Smart Energy Council and Senior Advisor at the University of Melbourne's Climate and Energy College. But before I get into the interview, here's a brief on the issue of gas. Gas is one of Australia's major forms of energy, but only makes up a tiny portion of our Australian energy mix, typically seen in gas peaker plants to back up energy supplies. Natural gas is 34 times stronger than CO2 at trapping heat over a 100-year period, and 86 times stronger over 20 years. In Australia, fugitive emissions, That's gas escaping into the atmosphere, either in the collection, transport, or distribution of gas, and unchecked, it contributes about 8% to total life emissions. The Kurri gas plant could become a $600 million white elephant that will seldom be used in response to the Lidl power station closing in 2023. Scott Morrison last year called for businesses to step up and put forward a replacement power generator. The response? Fast forward to May, and Scotty declared that Australia's publicly owned Snowy Hydro will become home to a new 660 megawatt open cycle gas turbine. Questions about the need for it are already emerging, and political scrutiny in Canberra is turning the heat up. John Stevens and Jeff McCloy, major Liberal Party donors, and Jeff, a former Newcastle mayor and businessman, purchased Kurri smelter, which they claim they'll turn into industrial estates, a business park, and a new suburb called Loxford Waters. Oh, and P.S. This will be the new site of the gas power plant. Gas will likely come from the Santos Narrabri project, delivered via the Hunter Gas pipeline. Last year, the government appointed David Knox, a former CEO of Santos, to be the new Snowy Hydro chair. Developers Hilton Grijon and Graham Burns, co-founders of Hunter Land and major donors to the New South Wales Liberal Party, they're pipeline developers and could also reap millions from this project. In May this year, the International Energy Agency stated in their report, Net Zero by 2050, a roadmap for the global energy sector, that no new fossil fuel plants like gas should be built. Everyone, please welcome Simon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, mate. Look, I'm an absolute fan, and it's an honour to have you on the show. I've read a lot of your work in various places, as well as your tweets, which I think are quite eloquent in how they bring together a lot of salient points like data, because without data, folks, it's like you're just an opinion, and how you often break down some very big subjects and help educate and inform not only the public, but also politicians and industry. So let's talk about Kurri, and apologies, I think I mispronounced it during the video introduction. There's a lot to unpack here, so perhaps if you could detail the International Energy Agency recommendations and how Kurri gas plant fits into it.
The IEA recently put out a report on how how the global community could achieve the Paris Agreement, and it came to the conclusion that scientists have many years before, but a very, very significant one for the International Energy Agency to come up with, that a strong recommendation, well, actually not even recommendation, and basically a determination that to meet Paris, to meet the Paris targets, we cannot build any more coal or gas power stations. We cannot extract any more oil, gas, or coal, approve any more mines. We must stop. We must stop expanding and start contracting those sectors. So, yeah, very significant from the IEA, which has never before really turned its mind to climate change.
The debate out there, people saying that this gas power plant is not required. Can you talk me through that? Why they're saying that?
Yeah, so the government has said they want to see this power station go forward. They've put it up saying the Liddell power station is closing down, therefore there's going to be a hole in the market and it needs to be filled, otherwise there'll be blackouts. So they've put forward this power station. Now the Energy Market Authority, or Energy Market Operator, AEMO, plus every energy expert that's looked at it, has determined that actually the hole that would be filled, the hole that would be created with the exiting of Liddell has actually already been filled by new entrants into the market. So they announced that Liddell would close down. 2015 was first announced that it was about to close down. So they've had about six, and it would be closed in 2022. That's bumped back to 2023. So many years for the market to adjust to that. And a lot of new generation has been built in New South Wales, and soon not that soon, but within 3 or 4 years, Snowy Hydro will also, Snowy 2.0 will also come online. So the technical analysis shows that this power station's not needed. The Snowy Hydro actually, it doesn't only own hydro; it already owns gas power stations around the country. It owns the largest gas power station in New South Wales, called Colongra. Colongra, in the last 12 months, Colongra has only operated with a capacity factor of 0.6%. Means 99.4% of its capacity is unutilized. It just sits there idle. Now that's actually not that uncommon for peaker power stations. They sit there waiting for significant events that often last only for 1, 2, 3 hours. So they sit there waiting for those events, and they might only operate for, say, 20 events a year, maybe only 5 or 6 times for 2, 3 hours. They'll start up and they'll generate just to cover the periods when, say, a coal power station trips or a transmission line comes down. We see this in the bushfires. Beginning of last year, there were major transmission lines that were shut down because fire was too close to the power lines. So they shut them down, and that all of a sudden they have to find power in a region where they might have been importing power from some other region. So peaker stations are very important for keeping the lights on, but they don't sit there and generate 24/7, 365. They're just for a few hours at a time. So they're actually perfect application for batteries. And the great thing about battery is that it doesn't create any pollution. It's able to use whatever generation. It can use surplus wind or solar generation to charge it, and then put that back into the grid when the emergency happens. So there's been a lot of calls that actually, if you had $600 million to spend, which clearly the government does have, you wouldn't put it into building another gas power generator that hardly runs. You could put it into a battery that could do useful work every day of the week, every week of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good demonstration of, keeping the lights on and lowering prices has been the success of the Hornsdale battery, which for like $90 million first time round paid itself off because of the islanding events that occurred with South Australia.
A gas power generation can only really cover those sort of emergency events, whereas a battery has a whole lot of different streams of revenue. It can do the frequency support in the network, it can do system strength, it can do black start. So if there's a complete blackout, it can help get the network up and going again, and it can do arbitrage, so moving energy from one part of the day to another part. So there's all these different system services that a battery can supply where the gas plant can't.
Yeah.
One thing really interesting, and I think that a lot of people have a perception that as we get rid of gas, and have more renewables, we also we'd have to have more gas, and we've actually seen that doesn't hold true in Australia. Gas power generation peaked in about 2013 in Australia, and is about half. We're at about half the level it was then. This year will be the lowest usage of gas since I think 2006. For power generation in the national electricity market. So we don't, the gas is important. We burn it very strategically. Those strategic uses are being pushed out by batteries. But we're not expecting to see an increase in gas generation in Australia as coal leaves and renewables ramp up.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're about to talk about renewables and technologies like battery storage. And I guess that from my perspective, that $600 million they want to use of taxpayers' money could be better spent on a massive, mega, like gigawatt hour battery that is, I think, planned for New South Wales. Is that right? I think something like that. Oh,
there are quite a few batteries planned around Australia. What's amazing, I mentioned before the AEMO's integrated system plan. That's the step change scenario is it's a remarkable document, a massive amount of analysis. All the data for it is available. It's really a treasure trove of information. It provides a costed plan to take us to 96% renewable by 2042. What's surprising is, although there's a reasonable amount of storage involved, it sounds a lot. It's roughly 90 gigawatt hours of storage required to do that. But that works out to be the equivalent of just 4 hours of storage for the whole system. So I think intuitively we think, if you want to have backup for the whole system. You're going to need weeks and or days and days of storage. But it turns out with just 4 hours of storage, the equivalent of 4 hours of storage, you can bring this. You can take the system to 96% renewables, having only 4% left being covered by fossil fuels. Now, if we want to get rid of that last 4%, there are ways to do it. But I think long before, there's about 10 different ways you could do it, but long before 2042, or maybe we bring it forward to 2035, long before then, we'll have more solutions and more confidence around which solutions are best.
A big thank you to Simon for helping me with this interview. It really was some awesome sage advice. And hey guys, girls, if you want to actually see the video in full right now, consider joining me over here on Patreon, where from as little as $2.50 per month, you can see this and a heck of a lot more. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, it's free, and otherwise, you be good and you be great.